story took place in June 1941, and the reason we went to Oklahoma was my grandfather had never seen his grandsons, and he ran a dairy, and he couldn't go off and leave the dairy, so he sent money to my mother, which was his daughter, to have us drive from North Carolina to El Reno, Oklahoma, which was about 1,500 miles. And my dad had an old Model A Ford and wasn't very good shape, but he fixed it up, and to make a good impression upon the relatives, he got a gallon of black paint and a brush, and he painted the car, and he put tar on the running boards and sprinkled sand on it so you wouldn't slip. And he on the roof, which had a cloth roof, he took some tar and fixed all the holes so the rain wouldn't come in, and he thought that was pretty nice to have the car all fixed up. He didn't know anything about changing oil or fixing the engines or that part. And so we loaded it up, and on the running board we had a can of water for the radiator, which leaked all the time. Yeah, every couple hours you had to refill the radiator. And my mother, my sister Verna, was only, she was born May the 25th, 1940, and this was June of 41, so she was a little over a year old. So my mother had a pan, like a big dish pan that she used to wash the baby in and wash out diapers, and she said, I gotta have a clothesline, so she tied a rope from her door to the headlight and had clothespins where she would hang the diapers out while my dad was driving down the road, so he'd dry them that way. And my dad was deafer than I am. They hadn't invented hearing aids back then, so it was hard to talk to him. So he just drove down the road and about a half a turn play in the steering wheel, so he would have to go this way all the time to keep the car going down the road. And he never ever drove over 35 miles an hour, or usually about 25 to 30, because the roads weren't very good. A lot of them were dirt roads, and didn't have very good brakes on the car. He never changed the oil. He said the Fords didn't need to change oil because they leaked so much. All you had to do was put fresh oil in, and all the time, and they changed their own oil. So we used to, whenever we went into a gas station, they had racks with glass jars with a funnel top on them, and you bought your oil that way, and they turned them over upside down right on the filler, and it would gurgle down and until the jar was empty, and that's how you bought a quart of oil. Back then, gasoline was about 18 to 20 cents a gallon, so it wasn't real expensive to drive. We stayed in what they call tourist courts, is like the motels now, except you furnish your own blankets, and most of them had a kerosene stove where you could warm up your canned goods and your meals. I was 15 years old the first time I ever ate out at a restaurant, so that was something poor people couldn't afford to eat out. We got to Oklahoma, and my grandfather had this two-story house, and we stayed upstairs, and I'd never lived in a house that had plumbing, running water, or toilet in it. And I was scared to death. It had a tank way up near the ceiling, and you pulled a little rope and it let the water run down, and afraid it was going to suck me down the toilet. And because I liked the outhouse a lot better, it was quieter and no noise. And my grandfather, because the baby, him and his son, my one and only uncle, and then my mother had four sisters, I think.
Were they all living in that house?
No, only the youngest one, named Rogine, she was in high school at that time, and of course I was only 6 years old. Well, we stayed and my Uncle Bert, he took and whittled out propeller blades and nailed them on the end of a stick, so when my younger brother Benny and I were going down the road, wind blowing through them would make them turn, and we thought that was a great fun.
Windmills.
Yeah, windmills. And while we were at El Reno, we went for a walk one day, and here somebody had a goat for sale, and Nubian goat, and it was pure white, and they only wanted $15 for this goat. And my folks decided to buy it, but if they bought it, they wouldn't have money for a motel. So we just took our blankets and slept beside the car or along the edge of the road. And when we were ready to go, my dad got some old fence chicken wire and built a partition between the front and the back of the car, right behind the front seats, and my brother Benny and he took the rear seats out and put a bale of straw in there, and so the big goat and Benny and I in one of us on either side of the goat and the goat in the middle. and Dad said, now when Nanny Goat starts humping her back, you just make sure she's over in the middle, and when she has to go potty, and my younger brother Benny, he was so interested in flying his windmill out the car, and first day, and Nanny Goat peed all over him, and it was okay at first, but then the wind blowing, we didn't have any glass in the door and the windows, so the wind blowing in and made him cold and so he couldn't tell Dad, so he said, Mama, I'm cold, and Nanny Goat peed all over me. And she said, well, didn't you push him, Nanny Goat, over in the middle when, and he said, I forgot. and she said, well, at least it was warm at first, a warm shower, and so you just slip your overalls off, and we'll hang them out on the line here, and they'll be dry in a short time. And we didn't have shirts on in the summertime. It was warm, and they hadn't invented underwear yet, so we didn't know what underwear was. This was a long time ago, and so he got his pants all dried off, and then he put them back on.
Gross.
And then when we got over in Tennessee, just last night, there was a steep mountain there, and everybody was tired, and so Dad took Nanny Goat out and had a chain on her and tied her to a tree, and Benny and I, and we had our blankets down along the side of the car, and here come a big truck and two men in it, and they stopped and said, you people shouldn't be sleeping. There's bears in these mountains here. And I remember my dad said, I sure hope they don't get my Nanny Goat. Anyway, they told us not to be camping along the road because that was the Cumberland Gap Road. And this was way before there was any 4-lane highways. Everything was 2-lane highways. Well, we got back to home in North Carolina, and the Nanny Goat had lots of fleas, and so Dad decided to he got some nicotine powder and put on Nanny Goat and to kill the fleas. Well, he didn't think about Nanny Goat decided to lick herself, and she ended up, the nicotine killed her. So all that expense and trouble going from Oklahoma to North Carolina and then losing the goat.
The one thing that I always remember is that she chewed the labels off of the canned goods.
Yeah, we had a box with cans of fruit and canned, well, corn and peas, and Nanny Goat got hungry. Even though we had a bale of hay tied on the rear bumper, we would give her a little bit of hay every day. She would after she ate her hay, she needed some dessert, and so we had the food box in back, and she ate the labels off the can. So we didn't know if we were going to have a can of peaches and a can of sauerkraut for lunch, or some other combination. But and then Nanny Goat reached our nose through this fence, and the seats were filled with cotton. That's the way they used to. And so she pulled it all out and ate the cotton. And then she was looking for something else to eat, and looked up and saw the headliner in the car. So she reached up and she ate all the headliner off. And time we got to North Carolina, the car smelled like a barn, and so Dad decided, he got his chisel and a hammer and a hacksaw, and he cut the body off right behind the windshield, and then my older brothers, they came by and they said, well, the way to take that body off is run a chain through it and tie it to a tree and back up and run forward and jerk it off. And they did that, and pretty quick they got it off. And then Dad got some boards, and he built a nice little flatbed and built a truck out of the car. So
now it had the sad ending to the.
So every time it rained and we'd go to the city to buy groceries every other week, which was a long trip, 6 miles. At least it seemed long. But they would only go every other week to town.
Now the sad ending to the goat.
Yeah, that was the end of that goat. We had other goats too.
But the reason why the goat died?
From eating, the reason the goat died, he licked the nicotine dust off that was supposed to kill the fleas, and it killed the fleas and killed the goat too.
That's the end of Nanny Goat.
That's too bad. That's a good story.
After all of that trouble.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Isn't that a good story, though? That's my favorite. That, and then the next, when you want another story, he's got one about burying a horse.
Oh. Yeah.